My life has changed by reading this book. Like, which one stood with me? I literally, no joke, think about these books like, does that not describe true love? Like, kind of give you like that real raw kind of like, oh my gosh, this is what I was thinking as I read it. Like I said, there's 47 books out of the 144 I read that were amazing, the best, stuck with me. I can't stop thinking about them, and will be rereads. Because to me, if you're not going to reread a book, it probably wasn't that good. It was an incredible book. Like, oh my goodness, it definitely. Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Courtney. I am a homeschooling mom to two boys. I have a almost 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and most of the videos you're going to find on my channel are going to be about homeschooling or probably have something to do with books. And I also have an interest in Christian theology, so you will find videos related to that on this channel, as well as some on motherhood. And so if that interests you, I would love for you to subscribe. And with that, we'll go ahead and introduce the video for today. So in this video today, we're going to talk about the books from 2024 as it comes to an end. What were my favorite books that I read? Okay, so according to my Goodreads, I have read 144 books. If it will focus, there we go. 144 books, and I actually just started keeping track of my Goodreads, the books that I've read, so there is bound to be some that I did not include. And but it was a lot of fun to go back and like look through the ones that I read this year and to go like which ones stood with me. And a lot of the books that are going to be on this list, I literally, no joke, think about these books like weekly. Okay, so the books that I'm going to share, the majority of them have left some sort of lasting impression, and many of them would be rereads for me. And so as I get into the books, I will definitely let you know which ones I would read. Again, with the 144 books, they are going to be a combination of like actual books that I have read or books that I have downloaded on my Kindle, and then other ones will be audiobooks. And so wherever you take a stance on any three of those ways of reading is totally up to you. There are some books that I think are just meant to be like actually read, and some of them it's just more convenient to have on a Kindle, especially the books that I read that were like 800 pages. It's much more convenient on a Kindle. And then there are some other books that I listened to and I was like, oh my gosh, I would not actually physically read that again. I would listen to it. There are some phenomenal people out there that read the books and they do a great job. Okay, so before we begin, I wanted to let you guys know I'm going to be reading my list off of my phone. I used a Google Doc and I put the title in, and I also did put the publisher/author, their description of the book. I personally like to hear a description of the book when I'm watching videos like this, and so I will read their description. I won't just give you Courtney's made up description. I will give you the actual description. And then I figured I typically log my books and like my thoughts while I'm reading it on my Instagram, and so I will just go ahead and like read some of the little like captions that I had during the reading for some of the books, not all of the books, just to kind of give you like that real raw kind of like, oh my gosh, this is what I was thinking as I read it or as I first completed it. And so let's try that and see how we kind of like that. I want to begin by just reading the 47 book titles, just in case like somebody out there doesn't want to sit here and watch this whole video, because I will be reading the description. So if there's certain books that sound good to you, then you can just fast forward to where I talk about it. I will put a picture of the book up, and so that should help you be able to find it as you fast forward. That way you can just hear about the books you specifically want to listen to if you don't want to watch the entire video. And like I said, there's 47 books out of the 144 I read that were amazing, the best, stuck with me. I can't stop thinking about them, and will be rereads. Because to me, if you're not going to reread a book, it probably wasn't that good. On my Google Doc, I did kind of separate them by like categories in a way, Courtney's categories. Okay, and so I will let you know that as I'm reading the titles, and then when we go into each book individually, you will know what category it was under. And also, with that said, in their categories, these are in no particular order. No particular order. Just, little PSA, if I pronounce the book wrong or I pronounce the name of the author wrong, we're all gonna just move on. I personally am not meaning to do that. We're all human. So I just want to put that out there because some people get super upset when you I get mad when people mispronounce my name, don't get me wrong, but like at the same time, let's just like show each other grace. All right, so we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about the books. First category is going to be the powerful books that I read this year. So out of all my favorite books for this year, these are the ones that made it into that powerful category. Defying Jihad, the dramatic true story of a woman who volunteered to kill infidels and then faced death for becoming one, by Esther Ahmed. So I'm gonna go ahead and read the description for you. It was the final test, a chance to win not only the love of Allah, but the love of her father, something she had never been able to do. Esther took a deep breath, raised her hand in the air, and at age 18, she had volunteered to become a suicide bomber. Defying Jihad is the true story of a girl growing up under radical Islamic rule, trained to believe her ultimate purpose was to serve Allah by dying as a jihadist, but 2 nights before she was to leave forever, she had a dream, one that would change the course of her destiny. Against all odds, Esther became a follower of Jesus, even though leaving Islam meant a death sentence. This was one of those books that I absolutely will reread. And when I was reading it, I couldn't stop. I think I finished it in 2 days. I did listen to the audiobook and I thought they did a phenomenal job. I highly recommend this one. It is one that stays with me. Obviously, as a Christian, stories of people's testimony of conversion from a different religion, I find to be so powerful and also so edifying for the Christian faith. And it is one that I recommend not only Christians read, but I think anyone can read it. It's just amazing. A lot of people who aren't Christians, or maybe people who are atheists or agnostics, often wonder, why do people follow a religion? How do people come to a religion? And especially, how do people become, convert to Christianity? And her story is so powerful. So number 2 is Saving My Assassin, a memoir, the true story of a Christian attorney's battle for religious liberty in Romania, by Virginia Prodan. And the description says, I should be dead, buried in an unmarked grave in Romania. Obviously, I am not. God had other plans. It's a must-read for all generations. It is an unforgettable account of one woman's search for truth, her defiance in the face of evil, and a surprise encounter that proves without a shadow of a doubt that nothing is impossible with God. At just under 5 feet tall, Virginia was no match for the towering 6-foot, 10-inch gun-wielding assassin the Romanian government sent to her office to take her life. It was not the first time her life had been threatened, nor would it be the last. As a young attorney under the communist regime, Virginia had spent her entire life searching for the truth. When she finally found it in the pages of the most forbidden book in all of Romania, Virginia accepted the divine call to defend fellow followers of Christ against unjust persecution in an otherwise ungodly land. For this act of treason, she was kidnapped, beaten, tortured, placed under house arrest, and came within seconds of being executed under the orders of the ruler. How Virginia not only managed to elude her enemies time and again, but also how she helped expose the appalling secret that would ultimately lead to the demise of the regime's evil empire, is one of the most extraordinary stories ever told. So as I was reading it, you can see my little chicken scratch thoughts. And so as I was reading it on my Instagram, I wrote, so powerful, humbling reminder that I have absolutely nothing to complain about. God has placed me in a country where I have no good reason to not worship him and share his saving gospel, holding my Bible with extra thankful hands. And the ending, I think it was the ending, is amazing. Full loop. So this is so powerful. Even if you're not a Christian, this story was mind-blowing. It was phenomenal. It was heartbreaking. It was heart-wrenching. It was just you're gonna keep thinking about it. And again, I think I read Saving My Assassin in 1 day, and I believe I listened to it. Okay, so now the third one is going to be Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, a devout Muslim encounters Christianity, by Nabeel Qureshi. So you can see I kind of got on a pattern. So in Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, and now expanded with bonus content, Nabeel Qureshi describes his dramatic journey from Islam to Christianity, complete with friendships, investigations, and supernatural dreams along the way. Providing an intimate window into a loving Muslim home, Qureshi shares how he developed a passion for Islam before discovering almost against his will, evidence that Jesus rose from the dead and claimed to be God. Unable to deny the arguments, but not wanting to deny his family, Qureshi struggled with his inner turmoil that will challenge Christians, Muslims, and all those who are interested in the world's greatest religions. It's thought-provoking, and it tells a powerful story of the clash between Islam and Christianity in one man's heart, and of the peace he eventually found in Jesus. Nabeel Qureshi, I can't remember what year he passed away or how soon it was after his conversion and subsequently writing this book. And I think in that way, it makes his story so much more powerful. And it's amazing when you read books about just like defying jihad. Like when you're reading a book about somebody who, it's not necessarily the conversion, but it's somebody who, what they are currently believing in and how strong they are in that, and how they want to prove that what they believe in is correct, and then they end up coming to Christianity. Again, whether you're a Christian or not, it's super powerful. If you are a Christian, I highly recommend you reading that. It is an amazing book, and Nabeel Qureshi he has a phenomenal testimony, okay? And, okay, so number 4 is, I actually just finished this one last week, and it is The Sun Does Shine, How I Found Life and Freedom on Death Row, and this was one of Oprah's book club selections, and it was by Anthony Ray Hinton. It's a powerful, revealing story of hope, love, justice, and the power of reading, by a man who spent 30 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. In 1985, Anthony Ray Hinton was arrested, charged with 2 counts of capital murder in Alabama. Stunned, confused, and only 29 years old, Hinton knew that it was a case of mistaken identity and believed that the truth would prove his innocence and ultimately set him free. But with no money and a different system for justice for a poor black man in the South, Hinton was sentenced to death by electrocution. He spent his first 3 years on death row at Holman State Prison in agonizing silence, full of despair and anger towards all those who had sent an innocent man to his death. But as he realized and accepted his fate, he resolved not only to survive, but to find a way to live on death row. For the next 27 years, he was a beacon, transforming not only his own spirit, but those of his fellow inmates, 54 of whom were executed mere feet from his cell. With the help of civil rights attorney and a best-selling author of Just Mercy, Bryan Stevenson, Hinton won his release in 2015. And this is just an incredible story. I mean, this is one that everyone should read, despite of what you think of the death penalty. He makes it so real with his writing and puts you there in that cell with him, again, regardless of what those other people who were on death row did, whether they were guilty or not. Hinton really shows how it is, and it makes you think, really puts you in that position where you go, is it right? Is it wrong? I mean, the thoughts I had, this was a book that not only could I not stop reading it, it was a page turner. He is, he's funny. Like, he's a great writer. And so not only was it a page turner, but it was also just so thought-provoking. When I was not reading it, I was constantly thinking, does my stance on the death penalty, is that okay? You know, it just got me to thinking. Like, I even went and looked up, like, is my state pro-death penalty? Like, I didn't even know. And but it also is just a wonderful story that even in like the darkest conditions of life you could be in. I mean, you know, sentenced to electrocution for a crime you did not commit, and to become friends with other fellow inmates, and to then see that, hey, one day their chair is empty or their cell is empty, to smell their flesh. I mean, he just transports you there. And I just could not stop thinking of it. I mean, I'm still thinking about it. And so powerful, so powerful. Okay, so number 5 is going to be The Sound of Gravel, and it is a memoir by Ruth Warnier, if I'm saying her name correctly. It is the remarkable true story of a girl's coming of age in a polygamous Mormon doomsday cult. Ruth Warnier was the 39th of her father's 42 children, growing up on a farm in rural Mexico where authorities turned a blind eye to the practices of her community. Ruth lives in a ramshackle house without indoor plumbing or electricity. At church, preachers teach that God will punish the wicked by destroying the world, and that women can only ascend to heaven by entering into polygamous marriages and giving birth to as many children as possible. After Ruth's father, the man who had been founding prophet of the colony, is brutally murdered by his brother in a bid for church power, her mother remarries, becoming the second wife of another faithful congregant in need of. As she begins to doubt her family's beliefs and questions her mother's choices, she struggles to balance her fierce love for his siblings with her determination to forge a better life for herself. This book absolutely heart-wrenching for me. I mean, talk about like a gut punch. It was just like, I had all the emotions, so many emotions for her mom, so many emotions for her and what she went through. The fact that she is able to recount it and document it, and that she's still able to find joy now, what she goes with, this will stay with you. Okay, so yes, it was a page turner. Yes, I will 100% read it again. It was not an easy read. It's incredibly sad, okay? Just incredibly sad. When I was reading it, I put unforgettable, heart-wrenching, couldn't put it down. I love how God uses these books in my faith. I literally should never complain about anything. Ruthie's story is unimaginable. And I feel like that pretty much sums it up. The next one is actually one I'm still actually reading. I first started by reading it on my Kindle, and then I ended up transferring it to my Audible. And so right now I'm listening to it. It's called The Choice, Embrace the Possible by Dr. Edith Eva Eger. So the description for this book is, at the age of 16, Edith Eger was sent to Auschwitz. Hours after her parents were killed, Nazi officer Dr. Joseph Mengele forced Edie to dance for his amusement and her survival. She was pulled from a pile of corpses when the American troops liberated the camps in 1945. I actually just read that part, or listened to that part last night. Wow. Edie spent decades struggling with flashbacks and the survivor's guilt, determined to stay silent and hide from the past. 35 years after the war ended, she returned to Auschwitz and was finally able to fully heal and forgive the one person she'd been unable to forgive, herself. Edie weaves her remarkable personal journey with the moving stories of those she had helped heal. She explores how we can be imprisoned in our own minds and show us how to find the key to freedom. The Choice is a life-changing book that will provide hope and comfort for generations and readers. This book, why I'm putting it in here is, I know because I'm listening to it on audio, I'll probably finish it today or tomorrow. But I literally, when I first started reading it on my Kindle, on my Instagram, I put, I'm not even a quarter of the way through this read, and my life has already been completely changed. I mean, just from the opening pages, her writing has had such an impact on my life. And that was even before she started going into talking about like Auschwitz, and now obviously where I stand, where I just read where she was being saved by the American soldiers, I still am saying like my life has changed by reading this book. It is so powerful, and just I can't wait to finish it, but I also don't want to finish it, if it makes sense. I just want like to continue just hearing her and listening to her words and her, I mean, she's like so encouraging, and especially with what she has gone through and how she's helping other people. She has a phenomenal story. Okay, and so I found this quote really interesting. So Oprah actually said, quote, "I'll be forever changed by Dr. Eger's story. The Choice is a reminder of what courage looks like in the worst of times, and that we all have the ability to pay attention to what we've lost or to pay attention to what we still have." And I definitely get that from her, that in the book she's such an optimist, and it's not like an annoying optimism, right? Because I'm a pessimist, and it's just like, it's just so refreshing, the type of optimist she is and how it's conveyed to us throughout the book. There was another quote that Dr. Eger's life reveals our capacity to transcend even the greatest of horrors and to use that suffering for the benefit of others. She has found true freedom and forgiveness and shows us how we can as well. So like I said, life-changing book. Definitely read it. I think you can either read it or listen to it. It will be a reread or a re-listen for me. Absolutely. I 100% recommend that one. Okay, so now the next one, this will be number 7 book. This is Permanent Record by Edward Snowden. So this one I just kind of started reading on a whim. I saw somebody recommended it and I was like, okay, I kind of have the image of him that was painted by the media, and I was like, it's been definitely removed for so long that I was like, you know what? I actually just want to read it from him. I want to hear his story from him. And so the description is, Edward Snowden, the man who risked everything to expose the U.S. government system of mass surveillance, reveals for the first time the story of his life, including how he helped to build the system and what motivated him to try to bring it down. In 2013, 29-year-old Snowden shocked the world when he broke with the American intelligence establishment and revealed that the U.S. government was secretly pursuing the means to collect every single phone call, text message, and email. The result would be an unprecedented system of mass surveillance with the ability to pry into private lives of every person on Earth. 6 years later, Snowden reveals for the very first time how he helped build the system and why he was so moved to expose it. And so he's obviously was a very notorious whistleblower for the United States. So like the media just painted him, right? And that is how the majority of Americans took it, is what did the media say about him? And we just kind of all took that as gospel, right? So I'm going to be completely honest, this is not necessarily a book I would reread, but it was a favorite of mine from 2024 because it was so powerful. It stuck with me. It still is sticking with me, and I'm still questioning everything. Like, maybe what he did wasn't that bad, And when you really start to get it from him of why he did what he did, you kind of realize, like, wow, it happened, and now we're all just continuing to, like, nobody cares anymore. We're just going to continue posting everything on Facebook and Instagram, and it's almost like what he did really didn't have that much of an impact because we know they're still doing this, what he revealed. And so I don't know if I'm remembering this correct, and it's a little bit of a spoiler if it is correct, but I'm pretty sure what was like the breaking point for him was when the United States actually had captured bin Laden, had killed him, allegedly. I'm a conspiracy person, so if you believe that or not. And when they allegedly killed him, and then he said they just kept tapping, they kept taking people's information. That was done, but his work and the United States surveillance just kept going. He had a problem with it. So again, if I'm remembering that right, I think whatever you think of security clearances and not divulging information, when you really hear it from his point of view, I think he does a really great job. And I think that it definitely is something that will stick with me for a long time. So it caused a lot of conversation with my husband. I mean, it was amazing. It was definitely a conversation starter, but not in like a bad way. Okay, so number 8 was, and this is kind of controversial, is The Four Winds. This one will definitely be a reread for me. So I found with most people, you either hated Kristen Hanna's Four Winds or you loved it. And so for me, I loved it. Did she absolutely break my heart? Yes. Traditional Kristen Hanna fashion is she breaks my heart. And this one, it was a hard read because it was so depressing, absolutely depressing, but at the same time, like, it was an amazing story and what she went through. And so I don't want to give too many details, but I listened to this one, and so I don't know, maybe reading it might have been a little bit more like drawing out that depression, whereas when I was listening to it, I was able to kind of speed it up a little bit. So sometimes I wonder if that kind of impacts why people are like, oh, I didn't like it because it was so sad and depressing, whereas like I was able to kind of like crank up my speed and kind of plow through it. But it was so powerful. I literally think about this book more than I probably care to admit. And I don't want to give spoilers away, but there was definitely a few parts where I was just like, oh my gosh, There was, spoiler alert, with her husband. And oh my goodness, I just like through the whole book, I was just like, it never came back up where they dealt with it. And I was just like, when the book ended, it was just like, wow, my heart was already broken, and I was trying to like pick it up, and I never could get the pieces back together because she never went back to it. Okay, so anyways, so The Four Winds says, the description is, it's a powerful American epic about love and heroism and hope set during the Great Depression, a time when the country was in crisis and at war with itself, when millions were out of work, and even the land seemed to have turned against them. Texas, 1921, a time of abundance. The Great War is over. The bounty of the land is plentiful, and America is on the brink of a new and optimistic era. But for Elsa Wolcott, deemed too old to marry in a time when marriage is a woman's only option, the future seems bleak until the night she meets Rafe Martinelli and decides to change the direction of her life. With her reputation in ruin, there's only one respectable choice: marriage to a man she barely knows. By 1934, the world has changed. Millions are out of work, and drought has devastated the Great Plains. Farmers are fighting to keep their lands and their livelihoods, and crops fail, and water dries up, and the earth cracks open. Dust storm rolls relentlessly across the plains. Everything on the Martinelli farm is dying, including Elsa's tenuous marriage. Each day is a desperate battle against nature and a fight to keep her children alive. In this uncertain and perilous time, Elsa, like so many of her neighbors, must make an agonizing choice: fight for the land she loves or leave it behind and go west to California. So when I was reading it on my Instagram, I post, I'm still not okay. Oh my heart. The stories that stay with you are the most important to read. And it is a wonderful story. Kristin Hannah is amazing. And I was, let's see, 4 hours and 15 minutes. So 28% into this out of, and I had 11 hours left. As you can see. And so it was like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And so, like I said, this book, you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. And for me, it was so powerful. 9 in my category of powerful books, and this was And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, a novella by Fredrik Backman. And so if you haven't read Fredrik Backman, he is really amazing author. I realized that I should have included Beartown in this. That was really the only one I liked. I really didn't like the sequel, and then I think there was a third one, but really good and a quick read. I listened to this and I think it was so powerful actually listening to the audio of this. It is an exquisitely moving portrait of an elderly man's struggle to hold on to his most precious memories and his family's effort to care for him, even as they must find a way to let go. With all the same charm of his best-selling full-length novels here, Fredrik Backman once again he reveals his unrivaled understanding of human nature and deep compassion for people in difficult circumstances. It's a tiny gem with a message you'll treasure for a lifetime. So, like I said, it's a really quick read. You can get the novella or you could listen to it. I enjoyed listening to it. Now, I wanted to share what I ended up posting on my Instagram about this. Barely over an hour, and I've listened to it twice and I've cried twice. So I listened to it one time through and I was like, I have to listen to it again. Oh my goodness, I cried both times. There was one part in this story, and like every time he would read this, I would just bawl. And so I don't know if this is like a direct quote, but this is essentially what I put on my Instagram. Noah asking, how did you fall in love with her? Quote, she got lost in my heart, I think. Couldn't find her way out. Like, oh my goodness, how true is that for... Oh, when you love somebody and you're not supposed to, and you just can't stop thinking about them, and they get caught in your heart and then they can't get out, right? Like, oh my gosh. And so I just felt like that quote, in the most like true and yet the most heartbreaking way, does that not describe true love? Like, her way, he or she, whoever gets their way into your heart and can't find their way out, like, oh my goodness. And that's just like traditional Fredrik Backman. Like, oh my goodness, the way he writes is so powerful. And every time in his books, I'm always, dog-earing his quotes and stuff. And so this was absolutely heart-wrenching and heartbreaking, but in the most like beautiful way. I cried twice, I listened to it twice, I highly recommend it. Okay, so number 10 is going to be When Breath Becomes Air by Paul. I'm probably going to pronounce his last name wrong, Kalanithi. So at the age of 36, on the verge of completing a decade worth of training as a neurosurgeon, Paul was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. One day he was a doctor treating the dying, and the next he was a patient struggling to live. Just like that, the future he and his wife had imagined evaporated. It chronicles his transformation from a naive medical student to a neurosurgeon at Stanford, working in the brain, the most critical place for human identity, and finally into a patient and new father confronting his own morality. So what makes life worth living in the face of death? What do you do when the future no longer has a ladder towards your goals in life, flattens out into a perpetual present? What does it mean to have a child, to nurture a new life as another fades away? So he ended up dying in March 2015 while working on this book, yet his words live on as a guide and a gift to us all. Quote, I began to realize that coming face to face with my own mortality in a sense had changed nothing and everything, end of quote. He wrote 7 words from Samuel Beckett, began to repeat in my head, I can't go on, I'll go on. When Breath Becomes Air is an unforgettable, life-affirming reflection on the challenge of facing death and on the relationship between doctor and patient from a brilliant writer who became both. I think it goes without saying that this book was obviously very powerful to me, and it was one that I couldn't stop reading. While I was reading it on my Instagram, and you can see I wasn't finished yet, but I just kept writing, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And that's how I felt throughout this whole book, was just like, oh my gosh, don't cry, Courtney, don't cry, don't cry. I didn't want to finish because how it's gonna end. You know what's coming. And so it is very haunting, the book. I mean, it just is going to stay with you. And that's just, I mean, even the title alone is just haunting, When Breath Becomes Air. We're gonna get into kind of like my miscellaneous category, where some of these were powerful and other ones were, a few of these I would still classify as powerful, but the majority of these in this category, again, in no particular order, are just like, hey, these were really good books that I read in 2024. And so these are ones I definitely recommend, and I'll let you know if some of these were rereads. So I finally read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and I don't know why I didn't read this when this was like out and really popular. I just took forever to read it. So for years, rumors of, quote, the Marsh Girl have haunted Barclay Cove, a quiet town on the North Carolina coast. So in late 1969, when handsome Chase Andrews is found dead, the locals immediately suspect Kaya Clark, the so-called Marsh Girl. But Kaya is not what they say. Sensitive, intelligent, she has survived for years alone in the marsh that she calls home, finding friends in the gulls and lessons in the sand. Then the time comes when she yearns to be touched and loved. When two young men from town become intrigued by her wild beauty, Kaya opens herself to a new life until the unthinkable happens. It is at once an exquisite ode to the natural world, a heartbreaking coming-of-age story, and a surprising tale of possible murder. Owens reminds us that we are forever shaped by the children we once wore, and that we are all subject to the beautiful and violent secrets that nature keeps. So this was definitely one of those stories where it was slow at times, but you also like didn't want it to end, and you wanted to savor every part of it, and you definitely become very connected to the characters, all the characters, honestly. And it is very much a coming of age, and it just, I think I would read it again. It's probably one that like you kind of want to read it when it's almost like fresh again, so probably in a few years it's definitely one I'll listen to again. But we just had a package delivered. I just wanted to make sure the UPS guy did not fall. My husband put like gravel because we live in the Arctic, so it's like so cold that you can't even use salt. I just want to make sure it doesn't fall. Anyways, okay, so definitely recommend. A sad book, but it does have it is beautiful. It is a beautiful book. Okay, so the next one, so we're on number 12 books. Number 12 out of the 47 books, The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp, a novel by Sarah Brunsvold. So Aidan Kelly is a talented, ambitious, and ready for a more serious assignment than the fluff pieces she's been getting as a cub reporter for the Kansas City Star. In her eagerness, she pushes too hard, earning herself the menial task of writing an obituary for an unremarkable woman who's just entered hospice care. But there's more to Clara Kipp than meets the eye. Maybe dying, but she's not quite ready to cash in it yet. Never one to shy away from an assignment herself, she can see that God brought the young reporter into her life for a reason, and if it's a story, Aidan Kelly wants that, just what Miss Kipp will give her, but she's going to have to work for it. So this book was one where it took me a little bit to get in, and I did listen to this one on Audible, and I think it was fine. Once I got into it, it was one that I could not put down, and I could not, like, it didn't want it to end. And so sometimes for me, those are the best books, the ones that I don't want them to end, but also the ones that I would reread again. And so this one was amazing. And I ended up going and I was like, oh, let me go see what else she has written. And obviously, like, if I would have just read that this was like her breakthrough novel, right? So she does have another book out, and I plan on reading that one in 2025, but this was very good. It is a Christian book. And, okay, so 13, Before We Were Yours, a novel by Lisa Wingate. Okay, so 12-year-old Rill Foss and her 4 younger siblings live a magical life aboard their family's Mississippi River shanty boat, but when their father must rush their mother to a hospital one stormy night, Rill is left in charge until strangers arrive in force, wrenched from all that is familiar and thrown into a Tennessee Children's Home Society orphanage. The Foss children are assured that they will soon be returned to their parents, but they quickly realize the dark truth. At the mercy of the facility's cruel director, Rill fights to keep her sisters and brother together in a world of danger and uncertainty. And then Aiken, South Carolina, present day, born into wealth and privilege, Avery Stafford seems to have it all. a successful career as a federal prosecutor, a handsome fiance, and a lavish wedding on the horizon. But when Avery returns home to help her father weather a health crisis, a chance encounter leaves her with uncomfortable questions and compels her to take a journey through her family's long-hidden history on a path that will ultimately lead either to a devastation or to redemption. Based on one of America's most notorious real-life scandals, in which Georgia Tan, director of a Memphis-based adoption organization, kidnapped and sold poor children to wealthy families all over the country. Lisa Wingate's riveting, wrenching, and ultimately uplifting tale reminds us how even though the past can lead to many places, the heart never forgets where we belong. So this one was highly recommended. I mean, who hasn't read this book, right? I definitely think it's one kind of like Where the Crawdads Sing, where like it is a really good story. It is very powerful. It's a little slow for me. It took me a little while to get into it, but once I got myself attached to the characters, like I was like, okay, wow, right? It is definitely one I could see myself rereading in a few years when it's a little bit more new. For me, books like this are like legit based on something that actually happened, makes it even more powerful. And I found myself as I was listening to this just reminding myself, like, this actually happened. Like, this whole scandal is a notorious streak on American history. And so highly recommend that one. Okay, so the next one, number 14, is Yellow Wife, a novel by Sadika Johnson. So kind of like Kristen Hanna, well, nothing like Kristen Hanna, but similar to Kristen Hanna, Sadika Johnson is one of my favorite authors. She doesn't have as many books as Kristen Hanna has, but I love her. I love her writing. Her writing is just like so smooth. Her writing is very easy to read, very easy to follow. Her books, the two that I've read, I just could not stop. And it was definitely like I finished and I was like, no, I didn't want her writing to be over. And I was like, I need to get another book of hers. And like I said, she doesn't have a ton of books, but I absolutely love her. And The Yellow Wife was an incredible book. Like, oh my goodness, definitely one I will reread and probably soon, honestly, because I just generally liked her writing, but the story was very good. So born on a plantation in Charles City, Virginia, Phoebe Dolores Brown has lived a relatively sheltered life, shielded by her mother's position as the estate's medicine woman and cherished by the master's sister. She is set apart from the others on the plantation, belonging to neither world. She'd been promised freedom on her 18th birthday, but instead of the idyllic life she imagined with her true love, Essex Henry, Phoebe is forced to leave the only home she has ever known. She unexpectedly finds herself thrust into the bowels of slavery at the infamous Devil's Half Acre, a jail in Richmond, Virginia, where the enslaved are broken, tortured, and sold every day. There, Phoebe is exposed not just to her jailer's cruelty, but also to his contradictions. To survive, Phoebe will have to outwit him, and she soon faces the ultimate sacrifice. Okay, so this one was, like I said, I plan to reread this one probably very soon. It is such an amazing story, well written, but it is also just so devastating. And it was like gut punch, heart-wrenching, and but I highly recommend it. I think it's a great book. Everyone should read it. It was a story that I had not read about. Like, it was about, I mean, her story of just like the position she was in and then what she was thrown into, everything with Essex. I mean, it was just like, I want to cry, I want to pull my hair out, I feel like I've been gut punched, I'm angry. And it just, again, but you fall in love with her as a character. I mean, it is just like, oh my goodness, you have to read it. You have to read it. And I started reading, pull it up on my thing, The House of Eve. And so this was, again, Sadika Johnson, and it was, let's see, 1950s Philadelphia. 15-year-old Ruby Pearsall is on track to becoming the first in her family to attend college, but a taboo love affair threatens to pull her down into poverty and desperation that has been passed on to her like a birthright. Eleanor Quarles arrives in Washington, D.C. with ambition and secrets. When she meets the handsome William Pride at Howard University, they fall madly in love, but William hails from one of D.C.'s elite, wealthy black families, and his parents don't let just anyone into their fold. Eleanor hopes that a baby will make her finally feel at home in William's family and grant her the life she's been searching for, but having a baby and fitting in is easier said than done. With their stories colliding in the most unexpected of ways, Ruby and Eleanor will both make decisions that shape the trajectory of their lives. Again, So having the same author as Yellow Wife, I mean, Sadiqa Johnson, just an incredible writer. I have not had an author like her in a long time, and I just couldn't stop reading. So very similar to her writing in The Yellow Wife. And it was never slow. I did not want this to end. I was listening to this one as well, and it was so good. So the Audible, I definitely recommend. And well, I did enjoy The Yellow Wife more, I think, just because it had so many layers, if that makes sense. This one was amazing because you have two stories kind of colliding and coming together. I would, especially if you enjoy The Yellow Wife. Okay, so the next one, so number 16 out of 47 is Homefront, and this is a novel by Kristen Hanna. So I thought it was interesting the Huffington Post said Homefront is Hanna's crowning achievement. Okay, so Kristen Hanna is probably considered my favorite author at this time in my life. So I don't know if it was because like I really enjoyed The Four Winds, and then we'll talk about a few others coming up, but I did like this, don't get me wrong. I do recommend it. It is a very powerful, unforgettable story. And it is amazing what this couple goes through. But as a military spouse, I think that's why it was like, maybe I was a little bit more like going in with personal experience and like kind of being able to judge in a different way. So if you're a civilian and you're not military, then I don't know, maybe you would see this as her crowning achievement. But I think just like having kind of that military background myself is just kind of like, oh, okay. Like I was kind of coming at it in a different way maybe. But highly recommend it for sure. It made my list of favorites. Crowning achievement of Kristen Hanna's? Probably not. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what the description says. It is, let's see, all marriages have a breaking point, all families have wounds, and all wars have a cost. Like many couples, Michael and Jolene have to face the pressures of everyday life, children, careers, bills, chores, even as their 12-year-old marriage is falling apart. Then a deployed Jolene deep into harm's way and leaves defense attorney Michael at home, unaccustomed to being a single parent to their two children. As a mother, it agonizes Jolene to leave her family, but as a soldier, she has always understood the true meaning of duty. In her letters home, she paints a rose-colored version of her life on the front line, shielding her family from the truth. But war will change Jolene in ways that none of them could have foreseen. When tragedy strikes, Michael must face his darkest fear and fight a battle of his own for everything that matters to his family. At once, a profoundly honest look at modern marriage and a dramatic exploration of the toll war takes on an ordinary American family. Homefront is a story of love, loss, heroism, honor, and ultimately hope. So again, I feel like because I am military and I have seen these types of things, not necessarily what happens in this story, but I have seen the dramatic cost of not only the war, like coming home, and I've also seen what it has done to families, firsthand. It's hard, I think, and I'm a little bit more judgmental when it's written in this. Now, again, I love Kristen Hanna. She did a great job. The book is dedicated to military families. So, obviously that is amazing, and I'm grateful for that. But, it's not a reread for me, but it is powerful. And I think as just a wife in general, if you're a wife or even a husband, like I think the struggles they go through in their marriage, regardless that she's being deployed, is amazing. And that alone was so powerful for me, what they went through in their marriage. And that, I think, is really why this even made my favorites, to be completely honest. Okay, so number 17 out of 47 is The Women by Kristen Hanna. I mean, who didn't read this book this year, right? I will say it wasn't my favorite, but it was powerful. It's not a reread for me by any means, but I do think it's one of those books it's going to stay with you, right? So Women Can Be Heroes. When 20-year-old nursing student Frances Frankie McGrath hears these words, it is a revelation. Raised in the sun-drenched, idyllic world of Southern California and sheltered by her conservative parents, she has always prided herself on doing the right thing. But in 1965, the world is changing, and she suddenly dares to imagine a different future for herself. When her brother ships out to serve in Vietnam, she joins the Army Nurse Corps and follows this path. As green and inexperienced as the men sent to Vietnam to fight, Frankie is overwhelmed by the chaos and destruction of war. Each day is a gamble of life and death, hope and betrayal. Friendships run deep and can be shattered in an instant. In war, she meets and becomes one of the lucky, the brave, the broken, and the lost. But war is just the beginning for Frankie and her veteran friends. The real battle lies in coming home to a changed and divided America, to angry protesters, and to a country that wants to forget Vietnam. It is a story of one woman gone to war, but it shines a light on all women who put themselves in harm's way and whose sacrifice and commitment to their country has too often been forgotten. A novel about deep friendships, bold patriotism. It is a richly drawn story with a memorable heroine whose idealism and courage under fire will come to define an era. So I think regardless, if you're a man or a woman, this is a read. This is such a powerful read, just to show kind of what women went through, not only during this time of the Vietnam War, but just in general, in different ways in life. I recommend it to men and women. Like I said, I personally don't need to read it again, but I did find it very powerful, one that will stick with me. I felt all the emotions through this. Of course, Kristin Hannah, like there was times where I was like, I'm gonna throw this book, you know, but yeah. I appreciate how Kristin Hannah conveyed what was going on during that time so perfectly. It was amazing. Okay, so number 18 is going to be The Great Alone, a novel by Kristin Hannah. Okay, so this one was one that I kept reading, was the best one of Kristin Hannah's, and I would say this one definitely made me feel all the feels. It is definitely one that I could see myself reading again, but like several years, right? Like it was very taxing on me mentally, not only because like we live in the Arctic as well, and like so like that kind of what they were going through, where it's dark for a long time, the weather is like the weather wants to kill you, right? Like all of that was very personal. Like I experienced that every winter, living in those climates, and so it was like I could bond with that, and I could that foundation. So it was very like mentally, like I understood that, and it made this story more real, and it made me almost bond with the characters more, because I was like, girl, I understand what you're going through, and like, wow, like, yes, I live in that environment where, you know, the weather will literally kill me. And so it says Alaska, 1974, unpredictable, unforgiving, untamed, for a family in crisis, the ultimate test of survival. So Ernst Albright is a former POW, comes home from the Vietnam War, a changed and volatile man. When he loses yet another job, he makes an impulsive decision. He will move his family north to Alaska, where they will live off the grid in America's last true frontier. 13-year-old Lenny, a girl coming of age in a tumultuous time, caught in the riptide of her parents' passionate, stormy relationship, dares to hope that a new land will lead to a better future for her family. She's desperate for a place to belong. Her mother, Cora, will do anything and go anywhere for the man she loves, even if it means following him into the unknown. At first, Alaska seems to be answer to their prayers. In a wild, remote corner of the state, they find a fiercely independent community of strong men and even stronger women. The long sunlit days and the generosity of the locals make up for Albright's lack of preparation and dwindling resources. But as winter approaches and darkness descends on Alaska, Ernest's fragile mental state deteriorates and the family begins to fracture. Soon the perils outside the pale in comparison to threats from within. In their small cabin covered in snow, blanketed in 18 hours of night, Lenny and her mother learn the terrible truth. They are on their own in the wild. There is no one who can save them but themselves. It's an unforgettable portrait of human frailty, resilience. Kristin Hannah reveals the indomitable character of the modern American pioneer and the spirit of a vanishing Alaska, a place of incomparable beauty and danger. It is a daring, beautiful, stay-up-all-night story about love and loss and the fight for survival and the wildness that lives in both man and nature. So I had heard a lot that The Great Alone was Kristin Hannah's like the best, right? This one always seems to come as her best one. I think it was beautifully done. But again, I feel like I come in a little bit biased. So kind of like being able to say like, okay, like mentally, I'm there with you. I get it. Like I'm in that right now. Okay. And so being able to have that bond with them and then to see what can come out of mankind when you are in an area like this is, again, it's very personal and it is very real. And while I read it again, probably again several years, but because it was so personal to me and because I bonded with the characters in a way mentally, it was why it made it in my top list. I mean, it was just like, oh my goodness, Kristen Hanna did a phenomenal job. And I think anytime you can like connect in a way to a book that way is amazing. She broke my heart so many times in this book. I mean, so many times. I think this is the book where I was like, I kept telling my husband, I'm not going to read another one of her books. I'm not going to read another one. Nope, not going to read another one. This one, she did it in for me. And of course, I'm kidding. I'm absolutely kidding. I will definitely keep reading Kristen Hanna. But after I read this one, this is the one book of hers that made me like want to chuck my book. So I was reading this. I was 89% through, and on my Instagram, I put, so you can see I was 89% through. Oh, if it'll focus. And so I put, in traditional Kristen Hanna fashion, my heart has broke no less than 5 times throughout this book, but I didn't want it to finish it. And again, I think that is what is so amazing though, is like, when I like a book, I don't want to finish it, right? Like I want to keep going. It's not your traditional like DNF, like it did not finish, but it is just like, I don't want the story to end. I got so connected to the storyline and the characters. Yeah, Kristen Hanna broke my heart for sure with this one several times. So is number 19, and this one is again one I haven't read, and it was Memoirs of a Geisha, a novel by Arthur Golden. So this one, I ended up obviously watching the movie a long time ago, and I just never read the book, and so for me it was amazing to read the book, and it's been so long since I watched the movie. So powerful. Okay, so speaking to us with the wisdom of age and in a voice at once haunting and startling immediate, she tells the story of her life as a geisha, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce her name because I don't want to butcher it. It begins in a poor fishing village in 1929 when a 9-year-old girl with unusual blue-gray eyes, she is taken from her home and sold into slavery to a renowned geisha house. We witness her transformation as she learns the rigorous art of geisha, dance, and music, wearing kimono, elaborate makeup and hair, and reveals just a touch of inner wrist, and competing with a jealous rival for men's solitude with the money that goes with it. We enter a world where appearances are paramount, where a girl's virginity is auctioned to the highest bidder, where women are trained to beguile the most powerful men, and where love is scorned as illusion. It is a unique and triumphant work of fiction, at once romantic, erotic, and suspenseful, and it's completely unforgettable. And that's exactly what this was. It was unforgettable. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept telling my husband about it, and the culture is just so foreign to us in America. And it's sad that it's kind of become forgotten, or we tend to just go with it with the movie, whereas in the book, I learned so much more. It felt like almost like completely different. I mean, again, it's been a long time since I watched the movie, it was definitely one where I was like, oh, I want to go, and it just made me want to learn more about this and the culture of it. So the next one is 20 is The Buddha in the Attic by Julia Otsuka. So this was a very quick, short read. I actually ended up listening to it, I think, when I was like working out. And let's see. So in 8 unforgettable sections, The Buddha in the Attic traces the extraordinary lives of these women from their arduous journeys by boat to their arrival in San Francisco and their time as new wives, from their experiences raising children who would later reject their culture and language to the arrival of war. Julia has written a spellbinding novel about identity and loyalty and what it means to be an American in uncertain times. I really like what the San Francisco Chronicle said. They said it's an understated masterpiece that unfolds with great emotional power. And like I said, I believe I listened to it when I was like working out, and then it was just one of those where, it's just like your own thoughts can be so deafening. Thoughts that I was getting over this book, if that makes sense, were just deafening. It was like, oh my goodness. Again, just an area where you want to know more, and it was done so beautifully, and again, just so eye-opening. Okay, so 21, The Help by Kathryn Stockett. So I love the movie. Of course, I watched the movie. I had not read the book yet, and I was like, I need to read the book. And I listened to it. The Audible version was phenomenal. So Aibileen is a black maid in 1962 Jackson, Mississippi, who's always taken orders quietly, but lately she's unable to hold her bitterness back. Her friend Minnie has never held her tongue, but now must somehow keep secrets about her employer that leave her speechless. White socialite Skeeter just graduated college. She's full of ambition, but without a husband, she's considered a failure. Together, these seemingly different women joined together to write a tell-all book about work as a black maid in the South that could forever alter their destinies and the life of a small town. And this was an amazing read. I mean, even if you've watched the movie, which who hasn't watched the movie, right? Read the book. Okay, absolutely read the book. I think it goes more into depth. I remember telling my husband, who's also watched the movie, like we own the movie, and I'll be like, oh, you remember like this part? Well, this is actually how it's portrayed in the book. And I think they did a great job with the book, but I also think there was just so much more that was actually like, I wish they had gone into more detail, and the book kind of adds that. And I remember like when I was watching the movie, like I didn't want it to end. It was such a good movie, and the book, if you enjoyed the movie, I think you would really enjoy reading the book if you haven't. And it kind of just adds more. It kind of fills it in, because I felt like when I watched the movie, I wanted more. I wanted more detail. I wanted it to keep going. I didn't want it to end, and the book does that beautifully. So I highly recommend that. Okay, so now we're going to go into the next section, and it is going to be Holocaust and World War II books. So I'm a huge historical fiction book reader, and typically what happens is when I start reading a book in a specific era or time frame or topic, I stay on that because I'm currently like in that time frame, in that mindset. And so that's why I have a whole bunch of Holocaust / World War II books, is because that was what I got on, and then I just wanted to stay in that mindset and kept reading. So we will go through. Okay, so like piggybacking on The Great Alone, living in the Arctic, it gets dark super early, like really early. So hence why the lighting has changed a little bit. I hope it looks okay. I was just like, oh my goodness, it's getting dark, and it's like early. Okay, so we're gonna jump in. So number 22 out of 47 is Carolina's Twins, a novel, and it is by Ronald H. Balson. So in the tradition of the Nightingale, Sarah Keyes, and Lilac Girls comes a saga inspired by the true events of a Holocaust survivor's quest to return to Poland and fulfill a promise. And let's see. So Lena Woodward, elegant and poised, has lived a comfortable life among Chicago society since she has immigrated to the U.S. and began a new life at the end of World War II. But now something has resurfaced that Lena can't ignore, an unfulfilled promise she made long ago that can no longer stay buried. Driven to renew the quest that still keeps her awake at night, Lena enlists the help of lawyer Catherine Lockhart and private investigator Liam Taggart. Behind Lena's stoic facade are memories that will no longer be contained. She begins to recount a tale harkening back to her harrowing past in Nazi-occupied Poland, of the bond she shared with her childhood friend Carolina. She was vivacious and beautiful, athletic and charismatic, and Lena had cherished the memory of their friendship her whole life. But there is something about the story that is unfinished, questions that must be answered about what is true, what is not, and what Lena is willing to risk to uncover the past. Has the real story been hidden these many years, and if so, why? Two girls coming of age in a dangerous time, bearers of secrets that only they could share. Just when you think there could be anything new to figure out from World War II comes Carolina's Twins, a spellbinding new novel by the best-selling author of Once We Were Brothers and Saving Sophie. In this richly woven tale of love, survival, and resilience during some of the darkest hours, the unbreakable bond between girlhood friends will have consequences into the future and beyond. And so This book, like, I'm just reading the description, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to read this one again. This was one where it was like, I read it in one day, and it was Audible. Like, I did listen to it, but I finished it in one day. It was so good. I didn't want to stop. I needed to know. It was slow at times, I remember, but it was also just one where it was like, I need to know. This was definitely one that I remember sharing on Instagram. So I was pretty much done with it. But you can see, okay, so I wrote Broke My Heart, but it was so good. I will definitely reread this, holding my babies extra long with each hug. And so, like, I can just remember, oh my goodness. So I highly recommend this one, especially if you do like historical fiction. Also, if you like World War II books, but I know some people, why they don't like World War II books is because it's like, isn't it all redundant? This one definitely is not. It takes a completely new story. Oh my goodness. So I highly recommend this one. Like I said, I think I'm probably going to start reading this one in 2025 again, because I read this one early on in 2024, and now I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to read it again. Okay. So 23 out of 47 is Light in the Hidden Places by Sharon Cameron, the extraordinary story of Stefania Bodorska. Okay, so I actually have Polish ancestry, and I just can't speak it, so I apologize. Like, I'm hurting my own self as a Polish, right? I'm hurting myself as someone who has Polish ancestry. A Polish teenager who chose bravery and humanity by hiding 13 Jews in her attic during World War II. It is 1943, and for 4 years, 16-year-old Stefania has been working for the Diamant family in her grocery store in, I'm not even going to pronounce it, in Poland, singing her way into their lives and hearts. She's made a promise to one of their sons, Ezio, a betrothal they must keep secret since she is Catholic and the Diamonds are Jewish. But everything changes when the Germans army invades. The Diamonds are forced into the ghetto, and Stefania is alone in an occupied city, the only one left to care for Helena, her 6-year-old sister. And then comes the knock at the door. Ezio's brother Max has jumped from the train, headed to the death camp. Stefania and Helena, sorry if I'm saying the names wrong, make the extraordinary decision to hide Max and eventually 12 more Jews. Then they must wait every day for the next knock at the door, the one that will mean death. When the knock finally comes, it is 2 Nazi officers requisitioning, if I can say that word right, her house for the German army. So with 2 Nazis below and 13 hidden Jews above and a little sister by her side, Stefania has one more excruciating choice to make. This remarkable tale of courage and humanity based on a true story. So this book, again, for me, it was a little slow, but it also could have been the audiobook. It might be more. So I don't know if it was the person who read it. I honestly can't remember, but I do remember it being kind of slow for me. So it definitely has a great synopsis, and so many people have raved of it. I remember enjoying it, and I remember liking it. It is one that I will read again just because obviously it is a favorite of mine, and I do remember like going like several times just like wow, leaving quite the impact and all the emotions. But I think I would try maybe like actually reading it on my Kindle or the actual book. Like I'm thinking maybe it was the reader that I was having an issue with, so I can't say that for sure, but I do recommend it. Obviously it made my favorites. Okay, so 24 is The Things We Cannot Say, a World War II historical fiction by Kelly Rimmer. And I remember absolutely just reading this and just like, what is it? What is gonna happen? And then obviously when it did, and I just was like shattered. Shattered. But like in a great way. It is a great story, and this is one I will definitely read again. Okay, so the synopsis is, in 1942, Europe remains in the relentless grip of war. Just beyond the tents of the refugee camps, she calls home. A young woman speaks her wedding vows. It is a decision that will alter her destiny, and it's a lie that will remain buried until the next century. Since she was 9 years old, Alina knew she would marry her best friend, Tamaz. Now 15 and engaged, Alina is unconcerned by reports of Nazi soldiers at the Polish border, believing her neighbors that they pose no real threat, and dreams instead of the day Tamaz returns from college in Warsaw so they can be married. But little by little, injustice by brutal injustice, the Nazi occupation takes hold in Alina's tiny rural village. Its families are divided by fear and hate. Then, as the fabric of their lives is slowly picked apart, Tamaz disappears. Where Alina used to measure time between visits from her beloved, now she measures the spaces between hope and despair, waiting for word from him and avoiding the attention of the soldiers who patrol her parents' farm. But for now, even deafening silence is preferable to grief. Slipping between Nazi occupied Poland and the pace of modern life, she creates an emotional and finely wrought narrative. It is an unshakable reminder of the devastation when truth is silence and how it can take a lifetime to find our voice before we learn to trust it. So definitely one I would recommend. I remember this one staying with me a little bit more. Okay, so then 25 is The Escape Artist, the Man Who Broke Out of Auschwitz to Warn the World by Jonathan Friedland. I'm just going to read a couple of the quotes because I thought they were really good. A brilliant, heart-wrenching book with universal and timely lessons about the power of information and misinformation. Is it possible to stop mass murder by telling the truth? So that was Yuval Noah Harari. And then, of course, another quote, a complex hero, a forgotten story, the first witness to reveal the full truth of the Holocaust. So this book, it tells the astonishing true story of Rudolf Verba, the man who broke out of Auschwitz to warn the world of a truth too few were willing to hear. In April 1944, Rudolf Verba became one of the very first Jews to escape from Auschwitz and make his way to freedom. Among only a tiny handful who ever pulled off that near impossible feat, he did it to reveal the truth of the death camp to the world and to warn the last Jews of Europe what fate awaited them. Against all odds, Verba and his fellow escapee Fred Wetzler climbed mountains, crossed rivers, and narrowly missed German bullets until they had smuggled out the very first full account of Auschwitz the world had ever seen. A forensically detailed report that eventually reached Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and the Pope, and yet too few heeded the warning that he had risked everything to deliver. Though he helped save 200,000 Jewish lives, he never stopped believing it could have been so many more. This is the story of a brilliant yet troubled man, a gifted escape artist who, even as a teenager, understood the difference between truth and lies can be a difference between life and death. He deserves to take his place alongside Anne Frank, Oskar Schindler, and Primo Levi as one of the handful of individuals whose stories define our understanding of the Holocaust. And so when I was reading it, you can see I was barely 3 hours in. Let's see if I can get it to, there we go. I was barely 3 hours in. And I just said 3 hours in, and there are no words. Broken heart. This was so powerful. And it was one that I definitely will reread. I might even reread this one in 2025. It left an eye-opening account on me. I mean, it left such an eye-opening account. I highly recommend this one. Even if you feel like you've read all the things about the Holocaust, this is one that needs to be read for sure. Okay. So number 26 was The Betrayal of Anne Frank, a cold case investigation by Rosemary Sullivan. So it's less a mystery unsolved than a secret well kept. And so using new technology, recently discovered documents, and sophisticated investigative techniques, an international team led by an obsessed retired FBI agent has finally solved the mystery that has haunted generations since World War II. Who betrayed Anne Frank and her family, and why? And so I'll be completely honest, who hasn't read The Diary of Anne Frank? Who hasn't watched the movies, right? And I just never really went into depth. We actually don't know who betrayed her family. And so when I saw this, I was kind of taken aback. It was just one of those things where you're like, okay, you follow the movie and it's like somebody just made a phone call off of a presumption, when the question is, was that actually true? It wasn't, right? And so we kind of are like, well, is that actually how it played out? Is that actually how it happened? And so when I saw this book and the title, I was like, what am I missing? I don't know if it was just one of those things where I was like, you go to public school, you learn one of the things, and it was just one of those things I just never thought about. Was her story is so impactful that the question becomes, wait, who actually betrayed the Franks? And, the Von Pells, and who betrayed them? Really, really good book. This, again, is one I will definitely reread, and it just is a whole other look at the story of Anne Frank, and just an area that I myself was just almost taken aback. Like, what did I miss? So over 30 million people have read The Diary of a Young Girl. The journal teen-aged Anne Frank kept while living in an attic with her family and the 4 other people in Amsterdam during World War II until the Nazis arrest them and send them to a concentration camp. But despite the many works, journalism, books, and plays and novels devoted to Anne's story, none has ever conclusively explained how these 8 people managed to live in hiding undetected for over 2 years, and who or what finally brought the Nazis to their door. With painstakingly care, retired FBI agent Vincent Pankow and a team of investigators poured over tens of thousands of pages of documents, some never before seen, and interviewed scores of descendants of people familiar with the Franks, utilizing methods developed by the FBI. The cold case team painstakingly pieced together the months leading to the infamous arrest and came to a shocking conclusion. I think it is very interesting how they pull it together, and you kind of walk away the story, or at least I did, going like, I understand. You know, it's sad, it's grievous on my heart, but I understand. And it makes sense that, you know, Miep Gies and of course Otto Frank, why they never personally came out and condemned the supposed people, right? It makes sense now after you read the book also why they stopped questioning. Why were we turned in? Who found us? And you can see how it just kind of slowly goes away and all the pieces come together that they did end up finding out who did it, and why they never like broadcast it. So I think where we're at now in human history and how far we are from that time frame, we can all go, wow, okay, like I understand why Otto and Miep, why they didn't come out and like broadcast this. Like there was no reason. They found out who did it, okay, they answered that, but there was no reason they needed to broadcast it to the world. And I almost think that's like, words are obviously falling short of, like, I'm glad that Otto and Miep and the people who are close to the family found out who did it, and they could be at peace with that and understand, but they didn't feel the need to go out and like avenge the deaths of Anne Frank and Margot and all of that based on who turned them in. Okay, so I definitely recommend reading that one, especially if you have or haven't read Anne Frank's diary. We all know Anne Frank, we've all heard of Anne Frank, and we've all obviously, like, we know there's her story. Okay, so 27 is A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus, and this is one I read recently. I saw somebody was recommending it, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. I believe it's for, like, juvenile fiction, but it is a heartwarming story about 3 siblings evacuated from London to live in the countryside looking for a more permanent home and a new meaning for family. And so it is 1940, and William, Edmund, and Anna aren't terribly upset by the death of their not-so-grandmotherly grandmother who has taken care of them since their parents died, but the children do need a guardian. And in the dark days of World War II, London, those are in short supply, especially if they hope to stay together. Could the mass wartime evacuation of children from London to the countryside be the answer? It's a preposterous plan, but off they go, keeping their predicament a secret and hoping to be placed in a temporary home that ends up lasting forever. Moving from one billet to another, the children suffer the cruel trickery of foster brothers, the cold realities of outdoor toilets, and the hollowness of empty stomachs. But at least they find comfort in the village lending library, a cozy shelter from the harshness of everyday life, filled with favorite stories and the quiet company of Nora, the kind librarian. The children wonder if Nora could be the family they've been searching for, but the shadow of war and the unknown whereabouts of Nora's German husband complicate the matter. So, again, I believe it is juvenile fiction. I don't think that matters. I, as an adult, enjoyed this, and even as someone who clearly was enjoying World War II books, this was a completely different story having to do with during World War II, where the children are being, given billets and leaving. And it was very good. It was sad at times, but it was also very heartwarming. It has a very bittersweet ending. So I think that one, and it's a quick read as well. Okay, so 28 out of 47, this is going to be Inside the Gas Chambers, 8 Months in the Sonderkommando of Auschwitz by Shlomo Venzia. So this is a unique eyewitness account of the everyday life right at the heart of the Nazi extermination machine. Shlomo was born into a poor Jewish Italian community living in Thessaloniki, Greece. At first, the occupying Italians protected his family, but when the Germans invaded, they were deported to Auschwitz. His mother and sisters disappeared on arrival, and he learned at first with disbelief that they had almost certainly been gassed. Given the chance to earn a little extra bread, he agreed to become a Sonderkommando. Without releasing what this entailed, he soon found himself a member of the special unit that was responsible for removing the corpses from the gas chambers and burning their bodies. So dispassionately, he details the grim round of daily tasks, evokes the terror inspired by the man in charge of the crematoria, the Angel of Death, Otto Moll, and the recounts of the attempts made by some of the prisoners to escape, including the revolt of October 1944. It is usual to imagine that none of those who went into the gas chambers at Auschwitz ever emerged to tell the tale, but as a member of the Sonderkommando, Shlomo was given this horrific privilege. He knew that having witnessed the unspeakable, he in turn would probably be eliminated by the SS in case he ever told his tale. He survived this in his story. So this is, I believe, should be absolutely required reading. Words are absolutely fall short of anyone trying to talk about this book, the things he describes, the things he sees. It's one thing to read a Holocaust book that talks about, the gas chambers and, what they presumably were doing. But to have somebody who actually was going in and coming out and what they would do with the bodies that came out, I mean, what this guy saw, I mean, you can't even begin to imagine what he saw and what he did, let alone how he lives with himself. Oh my goodness. And so this is one that I highly recommend. It again is going to have to do with the Holocaust, but it is a completely different outlook of it. So it is published in association with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I highly recommend it. It was not an easy read, but I feel like this was one that humanity needs to read, right? Okay, so 29 is a little bit controversial, but it is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. So I never actually watched the movie, and I never read the book. And so I was reading this one, I was listening to it as I was cleaning my house. And when it finished, I had to go back. Like, I went back and re-listened to it. And then I went online and was like, oh my gosh, did this just happen? And I think the ending, the ending is what makes it so controversial. So, again, I would definitely say, like, adults should read this book. I don't know if I would want my kid reading this book, but at the same time, like I would be careful what age your children read this book because of how it ends. So it basically says 2 young boys encounter the best and worst of humanity during the Holocaust in this powerful read that USAA Today called a memorable introduction to the subject of the Diary of Anne Frank. So in 1942, when Bruno returns home from school, one day he discovers that his belongings are being packed into crates. Sorry, that's my alarm. His father has received a promotion and the family must move to a new house far, far away where there is no one to play with and nothing to do. A tall fence stretches as far as the eye can see and cuts him off from the strange people in the distance. But he longs to be an explorer and decides that there must be more to this desolate new place. When he then meets the eye, while exploring his new environment, he meets another boy whose life and circumstances are very different from his own, and their meeting results in a friendship that has devastating consequences. So, like I said, it's a very controversial book, I think, because of how it ends and the interpretation of, again, I don't want to give spoilers away in case people haven't read it, but the interpretation of why it ended that way. It's a favorite in my 2024 list is because it was a different look at the Holocaust coming from the commando, right, the commander of Auschwitz home, which was next to the camp, and his family, and it's coming from a young boy's perspective. So again, anytime you kind of get another perspective during World War II, to me, that makes it very, very powerful. So that's why it was there. But I also thought the ending, though controversial, was very haunting. I mean, very, very haunting, because it just shows, if you put yourself in the parent's shoes, like, if you read it, you'll understand what I'm saying, but like, to put yourself in the shoes of his parents, it just makes the whole outlook of the Holocaust like, oh my gosh, they were justifying this. So I don't want to say anymore. I don't want to give any details away, but it was like, wow. Okay, so we're at book 29. We're getting ready to go into book 30, and as you can see, in light of Chris and Hannah's Great Alone, that I am running out of daylight, and I don't want to turn the lamp on because I think it's just not going to look right. So, okay guys, I will see you in, for you it'll be 1 second, for me it'll be a good night's sleep. Okay, so it was like 1 second for you guys. It's been like a whole day for me. So we're gonna go back, and we were on 30 out of 47. So number 30 on my list for being under the category of like World War II and Holocaust books. So this one was The Redhead of Auschwitz, a true story by Nekama Birnbaum. So I apologize if I butchered her name. Okay, so Rosie was always told her red hair was a curse, but she never believed it. She often dreamed what it would look like under a white veil, the man of her dreams by her side. However, her life takes a harrowing turn in 1944 when she is forced out of her home and sent to the most gruesome of places, Auschwitz. Upon arrival, Rosie's head is shaved, and along with her loss of her beautiful hair, she loses the life she once cherished. Among the chaos and surrounded by hopelessness, Rosie realizes that the only thing the Nazis cannot take away from her is her fierce redhead resilience in her spirit. When all of her friends conclude they are going to heaven from Auschwitz, she remains determined to get home. She summons all of her courage through death camps and death marches to do just that. This victorious biography, written by Nekama Birnbaum in honor of her grandmother, is as full of life as it is of death. It is about the intricacies of Jewish culture that still exist today and the tender experiences that are universal to all humanity. It is a story about what happens when we choose hate over love. So this was one that I just completely stumbled on by chance on Audible, you know, based off of what I had been reading and listening to prior. And I read the synopsis, and I believe at that time it didn't have like a ton of reviews. Nobody else I had seen like was recommending it, so I went off a whim and started listening to it. And I think I finished it within 2 days. And honestly, the reason why I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna read it, and I think Redhead of Auschwitz, as a mom of redheads, I was like, oh, you know, just by that I was kind of intrigued, like, what does that mean? And so that one I highly recommend. It will definitely be a re-listen or reread for me. I was just blown away when you just like click on a book and you don't even read the synopsis or anything, and you actually end up really enjoying it. It was very powerful. I really fell in love with the character development. I enjoyed learning not only about her experience, but just who she was, and it was just a really amazing story. So definitely 5 stars. So 31 is going to be The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and this is by Heather Morris. So this one is very popular. Of course, it was recommended, and I did like it. I fell in love with it. Would I say it was my favorite out of all these? Actually, no. I definitely would say like Carolina's Twins was probably my favorite like Holocaust book that I read this year, but this was definitely a top one. If you have not read it, I would definitely recommend it. I also enjoyed like The Escapist, The Escape from Auschwitz and stuff like that more than this one, but I highly recommend it. I mean, if you haven't read it, go ahead and do it. It was not one that like I finished in a day by any means. It was good, and I did enjoy like the character development. I did enjoy learning about the characters, but it wasn't as gripping personally to me as like Carolina's Twins. Again, highly recommend it, very good. And I understand why people rave about it. So the synopsis is, in 1942, Sokolov, a Slovakian Jew, is forcibly transported to the concentration camps at Auschwitz-Birkenau. When his captors discover that he speaks several languages, he is put to work as, I'm not going to say it, but the German word for tattooist, and he was tasked with permanently marking his fellow prisoners. Imprisoned for over over 2.5 years, Leo witnesses horrific atrocities and barbarism, but also incredible acts of bravery and compassion. Risking his own life, he uses his privileged position to exchange jewels and money from murdered Jews for food to keep his fellow prisoners alive. One day in July 1942, Leo, prisoner 32407, comforts a trembling young woman waiting in line to have the number 34902 tattooed onto her arm. Her name is Gita, and in the first encounter, Leo vows to somehow survive the camp and marry her. A vivid and harrowing, ultimately hopeful recreation of Leo Sokolov's experience as a man who tattooed the arms of thousands of prisoners with what would become one of the most potent symbols of the Holocaust. So the tattooist of Auschwitz is also a testament to the endurance of love and humanity under the darkest possible conditions. So what I really enjoyed, like big picture, was getting to have this incredible story about the tattooist of Auschwitz, but then at the same time reading the book, which was the 28th book we talked about, which was Inside the Gas Chambers, 8 Months in the Sonderkommando of Auschwitz by Shlomo Venezia. So it was just so amazing, and the most gut-wrenching and unimaginable, unforgettable, right? Just, haunting way to see the difference between the tattooist of Auschwitz and Inside the Gas Chambers. It was, I would say Inside the Gas Chambers was probably the most difficult read that I had in 2024 compared to the tattooist of Auschwitz. That one is a little bit easier in some ways to read than, in a lot of ways, I would say it's 100% more easier to read than Inside the Gas Chamber. So again, while I enjoyed Inside the Gas Chambers more, two experiences that were completely different and yet just so haunting and unforgettable. And so, all right, so now we're going to change gears, and I'm going to go into the category of parenting and homeschool. So I am a homeschooling mom, if you remember from the beginning. So these are just some quick favorite books that I enjoyed. Like I said, I am a huge historical fiction lover. Those are the books that I enjoy, but I also enjoy a lot of nonfiction books focusing on parenting or homeschool. I throw those in just a little bit throughout the year. It's not one that I want to read 100 parenting books or homeschooling books, right? But I do like to sprinkle some of those in. So I did want to share my favorites. I do have more categories to come, so if this isn't something you want to listen to, you just fast forward, and I'll catch you in the next category. So for parenting and homeschooling, my favorite by far was Homeschool Bravely, How to Squash Doubt, Trust God, and Teach Your Child with Confidence by Jamie Erickson. And so even if you're not a Christian, this was a phenomenal book. If you are homeschooling your children, or you're considering homeschooling your children, or maybe you're taking a part in your children's education outside of school hours, this was so encouraging. And I mean this completely. This is a book I will read every single year. As a homeschooling mom, I loved it that much. It was so encouraging, and Jamie Erickson is one of my absolute favorite authors, and I will have another book of hers coming up in a minute to share with you. So let's go ahead and read the description. Many homeschool parents have a long-term relationship with self-doubt. Did I make the right decision? Could someone else do it better? Am I robbing my kids of something by not sending them to regular school? What if there's a better way? Not a 3-step technique or a shiny new curriculum, but a change in perspective that transforms the way you plan, teach, and homeschool. Homeschool Bravely teaches you to see homeschooling as a calling, and it helps you overthrow the tyranny of impossible expectations and guides you through the common bumps in the road. Reclaim your hope, renew your purpose, and transform your homeschool, because the truth is God will use every part of your homeschool, even if your fears, faults, and failures, to weave good plans for your kids. So 100% I'm going to read this before every school year. It is so encouraging. Jamie is a wonderful author. Highly recommend that. 5 stars. Okay, so 33 is going to be Parenting 14 Gospel Principles That Can Radically Change Your Family by Paul David Tripp. So I have read a ton of parenting books, both Christian as well as secular, and this one is hands down my favorite. Now, it obviously is going to lean very heavy into Christian parenting, but this book, I gained so much. It's not just going after the behavior or discipline. I mean, it is coming at your child as just dealing with them as a person, and you as a person as well who also falls short. And Obviously, that's very biblical, but even if you're not a Christian, I think it's worth listening to if you're able to kind of overlook the gospel principles in there. Just looking at your child is going to fall short, just as you also, as a human being, fall short. And it's so beautiful. And so I got the book and I read it, the actual book, but then I also got the Audible version because I told my husband, you have to listen to this. And so I plan on listening to it again. This is definitely a book I could see myself reading maybe once a year. Like, I enjoyed it that much and I got that much out of it. I also felt like it was so refreshing and like it was just washing me. Like, it was just, oh my goodness, I felt so, like a lot of times you read parenting books and you just feel heavy after it, or you feel like you're falling short, or like, oh my gosh, I need to like, memorize all this and then test myself. Like, no, this one, it was just like such an edifying parenting book, if that makes sense. So what is your calling as a parent? In the midst of folding laundry, coordinating carpool schedules, and breaking up fights, many parents get lost, feeling pressure to do everything right and raise up good children. It's easy to lose sight of our ultimate purpose as parents in the quest for practical tips and guaranteed formulas. In this life-giving book, Paul Tripp offers parents much more than a to-do list. Instead, he presents us with a big picture view of God's plans for us as parents, outlining 14 foundational principles centered on the gospel. He shows that we need more than the latest parenting strategy or list of techniques. Rather, we need the rescuing grace of God, grace that has the power to shape how we view everything we do as parents. Free from the burden of trying to manufacture life change in our children's hearts, we can embrace a grand perspective of parenting overflowing with vision, purpose, and joy. Now, I did have this one recommended to me like by numerous people. And honestly, it's sat on my bookshelf for a while, and I am actually really disheartened that I put it off for so long. So it is definitely one I recommend, and I think if you're in like a parenting rut or you're just in the trenches of parenting, this one, as it says in the description, is very much life-giving. Okay, so 34 is going to be Habits of the Household, Practicing the Story of God in Every Day by Justin Whitmore Early. So this one also is going to come at it from a Christianity perspective. But I think, again, even if you're not a Christian, there is such a wonderful formula that he uses in this book of creating habits out of the everyday mundane things that we are going to stumble through as parents, and taking a lot of those deep trenches or those just difficult challenges we have with our children every single day and turning them into something beautiful and giving it this like life-giving habit. So I also really like Justin's writing. He's writing as a father of 4 boys who's in the trenches as well and has been there, and so he understands like you're reading this book and you may be mentally just like depleted and exhausted, and I love that he's like writing because he knows that you're probably that way. And I also just it takes a lot in a book to actually like make me laugh out loud, literally. And he has done that, and I love that, especially in a parenting book, right? And so I have laughed out loud like no less than 5 times in this book, and I'm only halfway through. And also, I'm only halfway through, and that's why I'm recommending it, because I love it so much. And I actually brought it, I actually have it with me, and so you can see I'm like halfway through, and I just love, he's got a lot of like tables, but he has a lot of tables that kind of break it down, and each chapter is pretty focused where you could just read a little bit of it and then he kind of wraps it up at the end. I just really like his writing. I really like his approach. Sometimes you read parenting books and it's like they're just overwhelming you with so much detail or examples, and he really gives it to you like clear cut. And I also like that his footnotes are right out the bottom, so you don't have to go all the way to the back and then be like, okay, what was he referencing? Because usually by then you've lost me. And so I like that his are at the bottom, and a lot of his footnotes that he has had is from other parenting books, both secular as well as Christian, and I have actually taken some of those as recommendations for me to read. So let's go ahead and let me read the description to you real quick. So discover simple habits and easy to implement daily rhythms that will help you find meaning beyond the chaos of family life as you create a a home where kids and parents alike practice how to love God and each other. You long for tender moments with your children, but do you ever find yourself too busy to stop, make eye contact, and say something you really mean? Daily habits are powerful ways to shape the heart, but do you find yourself giving into screen time just to get through the day? Do you want to parent with purpose, but do you know how to start? Award-winning author and father Justin understands the tension between how you long to parent and what your daily life habits actually look like. In Habits of the Household, he will give you the tools you need to create structure from meal times to bedtimes that free you to parent toddlers, kids, and teens with purpose. And then there's a whole list of what he's going to kind of go after. So each chapter is going to end with practical patterns, prayers, or liturgies that your family can put into practice right away. As you create liberating rhythms around your everyday routines, you will find your family has a greater sense of peace and purpose as your home becomes a place where above all you learn how to love. And so this is just a wonderful book. It will definitely be used as more of a reference book later on when, in the trenches of parentinghood, that me and my husband kind of come up, and it's like, okay, we're kind of hitting a brick wall. We need to address this, and his book I will definitely refer to. I mean, it is wonderful to implement the different things that he recommends, and he gives really great suggestions. So even if you're not a Christian, I think it's very easy to adapt that and create something that would work for your family as well. So I highly recommend that. Okay, so the next one is, so 35, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic by Mental Illness by Jonathan, and I think it's Haidt. This is a must-read for all parents. The generation-defining investigation into the collapse of your mental health in the era of smartphones, social media, and big tech, and a plan for a healthier, freer childhood. So this one, it has a huge description. I'm going to go down. Let's see. So after more than a decade of stability or improvement, the mental health of adolescents plunged in the early 2010s. Rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicide rose sharply, more than doubling on many measures. And the question is why? So in this book, he lays out the facts about the epidemic of teen mental illness that hit many countries at the same time. He then investigates the nature of childhood and the need, play, and independent exploration to mature into competent, thriving adults. He shows how the play-based childhood began to decline in the 1980s and how it was finally wiped out by the arrival of the phone-based childhood in the early 2010s. So he presents more than a dozen mechanisms by which this, quote, great rewiring of childhood has interfered with children's social and neurological development, covering everything from sleep deprivation to attention fragmentation, addiction, loneliness, social contagion, etc., etc. And so this book was just like, not necessarily was it life-changing for me, because I already have been so impacted by what is going on in our society, just my personality and how I have seen it impacting friends and family and people on social media and all the stories you read. It is amazing how many people I think don't understand this, and they kind of look at the generation of like our kids and what they're growing up in as, well, they just need to adjust, like this is life now, when this book really shows like no, we can put our foot down and make sure our children are not affected by this. And the scary thing is we actually don't know yet, because this lifestyle is so new, and what has happened to children by all this rewiring because of technology. Like, we have no idea what the impact is going to be, 10, 15, 20 years into their life. And so he does a phenomenal job. And I think he comes at you with laying out all the evidence that definitely is going to make you go, wow, I need to rethink this. And I think it also is going to lay it out where you can make small changes in your life with what you do with your children. And so I like how he comes at it with like the play-based childhood. This book comes from a secular perspective, so I highly recommend it. I've recommended it to so many friends of mine who are current mamas. And so regardless of what age your child is, or regardless of like how corrupted, maybe you would say, if that's the appropriate word, your child is because of what you've exposed them to or what you've allowed them to do tech-wise, I don't think that, and I think the author makes that very clear, like it's not too late. Now we're gonna go into my category of just Christian books, and so I do have another category after this, so if you don't want to see the Christian books, just again, you can fast forward and I'll catch you in the next category. So book 36 out of 47 is Holy Hygge. So this is creating a place for people to gather and the gospel to grow by Jamie Erickson. So if you listen to the homeschool categories, the Homeschool Bravely was also written by Jamie Erickson. So we live in the Arctic, as I'm already mentioned very clearly in this book. And so hygge is actually very important to us in our culture. When you live in the Arctic and you have very dark and gloomy and short days, lots of snow. I mean, you look outside and it's just white, right? It's cold, very frigid temperatures. I mean, it's just miserable outside. And it's very easy for that to come inside. And so hygge is so important to us in our culture. And this actually, it goes through many, many different countries. It's not just where we live. And I highly recommend wherever you live to look into hygge. And there's so many wonderful books out there that I have loved that implement hygge and explain hygge. And so this one is Holy Hygge. So it brings in that Christian element to hygge, and I absolutely loved it. So when I started just realizing I just stumbled upon her book and I was like, oh my gosh, there's the Holy Hygge. Like, let's bring that Christian element in. And hygge really, it's easy to bring the Christian elements in it when you study it. So let's go ahead and read the description. So hygge has become a cultural buzzword. When many read about this Danish practice, their shoulders lift in excitement, then fall in an exhale. In a culture of rush, hygge appeals to their desire for rest, for slow living, shared moments, and fostered friendships. It has a strong tie to beauty, contentment, and well-being. It's warm and inviting. Hygge is the opposite of hustle. It eschews abundance, it savors, it takes things slow, and it envelops you in sanctuary. It is home. When you sit in a comfy chair by the fire, that's hygge. When you arrange a fresh bouquet of wildflowers on a bedside table, that's hygge too. Candles, soft furnishings, natural light, fresh baked pastries, intimate gatherings with friends, these are what come to mind when you think of hygge. But hygge can be so much more. In Holy Hygge, Jamie Erickson unites the popular Danish practice with the deep theological truths of the gospel. She unpacks the 7 tenets of hygge: hospitality, relationships, well-being, atmosphere, comfort, contentment, and rest. In addition, she shows how the external veneer of a lifestyle can create a life-giving home only when placed under the hope of the gospel. Holy Hygge provides practical ideas for using hygge to gather people and introduce them to faith in Christ. Each chapter concludes with discussion, questions, scripture references, and a prayer. So I would say regardless, if you're interested in anything that's kind of related to that topic of hygge, definitely go and look it up. I can put a couple right here that I really enjoyed this year. I definitely plan on reading Holy Hygge like right before we enter into our long, drawn-out winter months. And I actually did that before this winter, and I found it just to be life-giving and almost like preparatory for me as we were getting ready to enter into this very dark, gloomy, cold, long winter season for us. And even if you don't live in a cold environment, hygge can be used at any point. There's something so comforting of a fire, right? Or cozy food with friends, right? Or warm drinks, and you can just kind of go down the line. So I highly recommend that one. It is a 5-star read. Again, I love Jamie Erickson. So number 37 is going to be None Like Him, 10 Ways God is Different from Us and Why That's a Good Thing by Jen Wilkin. So I absolutely loved this book. I listened to it on Audible, and this is one that I actually plan on buying the book, and it's like always on sale. So I will link it down below, as I will with all these books, and it may be on sale. Like a lot of times it's like $5, and I still haven't bought it, but I definitely am going to read this one again. I love Jen Wilkin. I love how she writes. She's an easy read, and she I'm a theological nerd, I'm a Bible nerd, but I just love how simple it is, and she writes to like a mama brain. But it's also just so easy to digest, and if you're not a Bible nerd or you're new in the faith, she is a wonderful place to start. Okay, so the description is: God is self-existent, self-sufficient, eternal, immutable, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, sovereign, infinite, and incomprehensible. we're not. And that's a good thing. Our limitations are by design. We were never meant to be God, but at the root of every sin is our rebellious desire to possess attributes that belong to God alone, calling us to embrace our limits as a means of glorifying God's limitless power. Jen Wilkin invites us to celebrate the freedom that comes when we rest in letting God be God. 100% 5-star read. I will definitely be reading this again. Like I said, I definitely plan on buying it. I just need to actually buy it. So the next one, book 38, is going to be In His Image, 10 Ways God Calls Us to Reflect His Character by Jen Wilkin. So this one, again, I read the first one and I was like, oh my gosh. And so then I picked up this book. I also listened to this one and I also plan on buying this one. So the description is, sometimes we ask, what is God's will for my life? When we should really be asking, who should I be? The Bible has an answer: be like the very image of God. By exploring 10 characteristics of who God is: holy, loving, just, good, merciful, gracious, faithful, patient, truthful, and wise, this book helps us understand who God intends for us to be. Through Christ, the perfect reflection of the image of God, we will discover how God's own attributes impact how we live, leading to freedom and purpose as we follow His will and are conformed to His image. So this one, I'm also going to buy 5 stars. I will definitely read this one again, probably when I get the paperback book. So I highly recommend that one. And I actually enjoyed this one better than the first one. Okay, so book 39 is Women of the Word, How to Study the Bible with Both of Our Hearts and Our Minds by Jen Wilkin. So this one was recommended to me a long time ago, and I actually did have it in my TBR, and I just kept like passing it up. So once I read those other 2 books by Jen Wilkin, I was like, okay, I stumbled upon this one. I was like, it sounds familiar. I was like, oh yeah, because it's been in my TBR for like how long? So this one, I do think it's beneficial if you buy it. Again, just because of how the content is, I think it's definitely one that you're going to want to have physically in front of you. And so the description is, we all know it's important to study God's word, but sometimes it's hard to know where to start. What's more is a lack of time, emotionally driven approaches, and past frustrations can erode our resolve to keep growing in our knowledge of Scripture. How can we as Christian women keep our focus and sustain our passion when reading the Bible? Offering a clear and concise plan to help women go deeper in their study of Scripture, this book will equip you to engage God's Word in a way that trains your mind and transforms your heart. So this is definitely one that I'm going to buy. Like I said, I think as I was listening to it, it was like I felt like I needed to take notes, or I was like, oh, I wish I could actually like see this in front of me laid out. So that is definitely one I will buy. And if that's one you want me to follow up on, like if I start actually implementing that book in my Bible study time, then, comment that down below and we can go from there. Okay, so book 40, and this is probably the book that out of all my Christian books I read this year, this is the second one I would say that had the most impact on me as a Christian and my walk with God and just my spiritual growth as a Christian. And that is the Ragamuffin Gospel: Good News for the Bedraggled, Beat Up, and Burnt Out by Brennan Manning. If you have not read this one, you need to read it. It is controversial in some ways. I saw some people in the reviews were like, oh, I don't understand why this is so controversial, or I see why this is so controversial. And then you also have people like attacking the book or calling Brennan Manning out. And this book, I think, is written for all Christians, but it is definitely written for the bedraggled, the beat up, and the burnout, as he puts it. I mean, if you are currently just in your personal life, your walk with Christ, whatever it is, and you're just in not necessarily a rut, but just in a very low place as a Christian, this is the book you need to read. And again, even if you're not, this one, it was just like food for the soul. Like I said, it affected me and my Christian walk, my prayer life, and my spiritual growth with God in a way that none of the other books did, except for one, and that one's coming up. But this is one that not only will I read it again, but this is probably one that I will read probably twice a year, honestly. Like, it had that much of an impact on me, and every sentence, every paragraph, every chapter, I just couldn't get enough. So this is one I listened to it and I did enjoy the audio. I will probably buy this one so I can take notes in it and I can put Bible verses and I can highlight, and I think that would just be a really good, almost like a life reference book for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the description. Are you bedraggled, beat up, burnt out? Most of us believe in God's grace in theory, but somehow we can't seem to apply it in our daily lives. We continue to see him as a small-minded bookkeeper tallying our failures and successes on a score sheet. Yet God gives us his grace willingly, no matter what we've done. We come to him as ragamuffins, dirty, bedraggled, and beat up. And when we sit at his feet, he smiles upon us, the chosen objects of his furious love. Brennan Manning's now classic Meditation on Grace and What It Takes to Access It, simple honesty, has changed thousands of lives. And I can say amen to that. So I liked this quote from Max Lucado. Brennan Manning does a masterful job of blowing the dust off of shop-worn theology and allowing God's grace to do what only God's grace can do, amaze. And so if you watched any of my other videos recently, like grace, the doctrine of grace is just what God is like made me focus on the last 3 months, and doing studies on it and deep dives, and I'm just being just completely, God is just washing over me, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I am such a changed Christian, and my spiritual growth is just off the charts, and I am just, it's just amazing when you not only go through spiritual growth, but you just realize you're just in awe of God. I mean, I'm in awe of God every day, but when you just are sitting at his feet and the doctrine of grace is just on your heart, and you're like, oh my goodness. And so that book obviously was very powerful for me. Okay, so 5 stars, 100%. You need to listen to it, or you need to read it. Maybe both. 31 is The Grace and Truth Paradox, Responding with Christ-like Balance by Randy Alcorn. So I would say this was the third book that out of all the Christian books I read, or faith books, this was the third one that had the most impact. And this book, I wish I didn't bring it over here, but I wish I did, is small, like super small. It's a super quick read. You could probably sit down and read it in one sitting. And then you're probably, if you're like me, are like, I could just read that again. I need to read that again. This is one that not only will I read every year, but I may even read this one twice a year, because again, kind of like the Ragamuffin Gospel, it's coming at really with that grace and that balance between grace and truth. And I find that many Christians I come in contact with, the majority that I meet, are more of the heavy on the law side. And so this book was so refreshing and so edifying. I can't even explain how edifying it was to be like, okay, I'm not wrong. Like, they're so focused on the truth / the law and upholding that, and they've completely lost the balance of, they're just offering no grace. So this one, the description by Randy, is Christians trying to model their lives after Jesus may find that he gets buried under lists, rules, and formulas. Randy Alcorn offers a simple 2-point checklist for Christ-likeness based on John 1:14. The test consists of balancing grace and truth equally and unapologetically. Grace without truth deceives people, and it ceases to be grace. Truth without grace crushes people, and it ceases to be truth. Alcorn shows the reader how to show the world Jesus, offering grace instead of the world's apathy and tolerance, offering truth instead of the world's relativism and deception. So is it grace or truth, or is it both? Truth without grace breeds self-righteousness and crushing legalism. Grace without truth breeds deception and moral compromise. Is it possible to embrace both in balance? Jesus did. So this book, I read a few of the reviews before I read it, because I was trying to figure out, like, which one do I want to read, this one or the next one that I'm going to talk about. And I remember one of the comments just stuck out to me for a reason, and the person said, buy this, buy more of them, and hand them out to everyone you meet. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally felt that, and I've never let that go every time I pick up that book. It is so true. Buy the book, read the book, and then buy more and hand them out literally to everyone, believers or non-believers. It was so impactful. Okay, so book 42 out of 47. So this one is going to be the book that, honestly, out of all the Christian books I read this year in 2024, this is the one that had the most impact on me. Spiritually, mentally, just what I was going through. Like, this was the book that God used to reach me. And I don't say that lightly. This is the book that not only helped me grow in my spiritual growth, it helped me grow in my prayer life. It just helped me grow closer to God on a level that I didn't even know was possible. I am so in awe of God after this book. Now, this book was a page turner. I couldn't get enough. I have highlighted it. I have wrote in it. Like, this book, I think, is a must read for anyone and everyone. I absolutely am just blown away by it and God's grace. So this one, and I am going to say this as well, this book, out of all the books I read in 2024, this was my favorite. And I think because it had such an impact on me and my faith. But even without that, like, the whole book just was so impactful and thought-provoking. And this is literally a book that it was like, no, I don't want to watch anything. No, I don't want to go shopping. Like, no, I just want to sit here and I want to read, and I don't want to stop reading it. So this one I actually read the actual book, which was great because, like I said, I couldn't stop highlighting. And it's The Case for Grace. A journalist explores the evidence of transformed lives, and it is by Lee Strobel. Okay, so the description is: the case for a creator explored the scientific evidence for God. The case for Christ investigated the historical evidence for Jesus. The case for faith responded to 8 major objections about Christianity. And the case for the real Jesus refuted the current challenges to the Bible and Christ. Now, in the case for grace, Lee Strobel crafts a compelling and highly personal case for God, focusing on God's transforming work in the lives of men and women today. Writing with unusual candor, Lee draws upon his own journey from atheism to Christianity to explore the depth and breadth of God's redeeming love for spirituality, wayward people. He travels thousands of miles to capture the inspiring stories of everyday people whose values have been radically changed and who've discovered the how and why behind God's amazing grace. You'll encounter racists, addicts, and even murderers who have found new purpose and hope. You'll meet once bitter people who have received God's power to forgive those who have harmed them, and equally amazing people mired in guilt who have discovered that they can even forgive themselves. Through it all, you will be encouraged as you see how God's grace can revolutionize your eternity and relationships starting today. So I say this, again, complete honesty, this is a book that not only would I reread, but this is a book that I would almost just keep reading, like just chunks, right? Like I would just constantly like read maybe like a page or two and then a page or two and just like continue. And then when I finish it, let's just start over. The stories that he includes, all of them, I have just been like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And again, unless you read it and you read the stories, and I don't want to give anything away. I don't want to do any spoilers because this is a book you have to read. And life-changing, life-impacting. And I would give this challenge that if you're not a Christian, if you're not a Christian, even if you have a different faith, this is a book you have to read. This is absolutely a book you have to read. And even if you're a Christian and you know, you're fine, your walk with Christ is great, your walk with other Christians is fine, whatever, like you've never had church hurt or whatever it is, this is definitely one you just need to read, and I think it will definitely edify you and be so powerful. Next book 43 out of 47, is going to be Unplanned. So this is the dramatic true story of a former Planned Parenthood leader's eye-opening journey across the lifeline by Abby Johnson. And so this one, the description is: Abby Johnson quit her job in October 2009. That simple act became a national news story because Abby was the director of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Texas who, after participating in an actual abortion for the first time, walked down the street to join the Coalition for Life. It is a heart-stopping personal drama of life and death encounters and a courtroom battle and spiritual transformation that speaks hope and compassion into the political controversy that surrounds this issue. Telling Abby's story from both sides of the abortion clinic property line, this book is a must-read for anyone who cares about life versus rights debates and helping women who face crisis pregnancies. Now, okay, so this one I actually read through. I did not listen to it, so I don't know how the audio was. But this one was definitely a page turner, especially in the beginning when there's a lot of her going back and forth and doubting. It is amazing regardless of where you stand on this issue of pro-life or pro-choice, like even beyond just politically. It is amazing just to going through Abby's mind, and as she's walking you through and describing, and you're feeling that inner battle she has. And I remember just how freeing it was when she walked away from it, and how she just felt like a completely changed person, and so many burdens were lifted off of her. So it's just an amazing, I would say just her transformation throughout the entire book was so amazing, so uplifting to follow. And I highly recommend that one, regardless if you're, really focused on the political debate or not. It was just a really good story, and it was definitely a page turner. Okay, so 44 is Faithfully Different, Regaining a Biblical Clarity in a Secular Culture by Natasha Crain. So this one, the description is, in an increasingly secular society, those who have a biblical worldview are now a shrinking minority as mainstream culture grows more hostile towards the Bible's truth and those who embrace them. You will face mounting pressures from family and friends, media, academia, and government to change and even abandon your beliefs. But these challenges also create abundant opportunities to stand strong for Christ and shine the light to those who hurt by darkness of our day. So I love Natasha Crain. I think she's a wonderful author. She's very easy to understand and very easy to read. She's very clear and concise. I love her books. The ones about talking with your kids about Jesus, or talking with your children about God. Those books are like curriculum, sort of curriculum adapted. So they have a lot of conversations and how to answer certain things, and you're teaching your kids through it. And so those are phenomenal. Those are actually embedded into the curriculum that we're doing. So this one was obviously one I was like, of course I'm going to read it, because I already really enjoyed her. And I think especially in our day and age where we are as Christians a minority from a viewpoint, this book was definitely very powerful, and definitely one that I will continue to read as our culture changes and it becomes more difficult to express our Christian beliefs and take our Christian stances, but also just as we go forward with raising our children and the things that they will encounter, particularly being homeschooled children, and then as they go out into the world in college and stuff. So if you are a parent, this is definitely one that if you don't want your children to be unchurched, right, when they go to college, because that is an epidemic that's going on right now, is a lot of parents are sending their kids to college and even high school nowadays, and then your kids are walking away from the faith. And so this book I think would be very edifying and very beneficial, very helpful to read as parents, and then either have your children read it or read it with them possibly. And I really think it would be powerful in their life and guarding them as they go into these areas that are very challenging to our Christian viewpoints. Okay, so 45 is Hard to Believe, the High Cost and Infinite Value of Following Jesus by John MacArthur. Jesus Christ did not die on the cross so that you and I could have a nice day. Ministers and teachers who water down the gospel of Christ in order to make it more popular and appealing may be leading their fun-loving audiences down the road to eternal punishment. This book by MacArthur is unflinching, unapologetic on the modern tendency to alter the true message of Christianity in order to meet the whims and desires of a culture hoping for non-confrontational messages, easy answers, and superficial commitments. Too many people just want a Madison Avenue Jesus to make them well, make them happy and prosperous. But Jesus Christ isn't a personal genie. He is the Savior. He died in agony to satisfy the wrath of a holy God and to forgive the sins of humankind. Faith in Him demands a willingness to make any sacrifice He asks. The hard truth about Christianity is that the cost is high, but the rewards are priceless, abundant, and eternal life that comes only from faithfully following Christ. So I read this one on my Kindle, lots and lots of highlights. There is not a book that I have not read by John MacArthur that is not impactful. I mean, every word that John MacArthur uses is powerful, it has purpose, and if you have not read any of MacArthur's book, this one was definitely a hard one to read, just because, you know, it's gonna come at easy believism, and so definitely very powerful. And but I highly recommend it. I think it's a great read. It will definitely be one that I will read again. So our final two books, so 46 and 47, are gonna be under the category of true crime. So I, you know, love historical fiction books. I love reading Christian theology books, and I absolutely love true crime. And so these, I read a ton of true crime books, but these were the two that really like stood out to me and really like stayed with me. And I have a whole bunch on my Libby, like on through my library, that are on hold. And they've been on hold for a long time, so I'm like, okay, I'm probably gonna have to just get the paperback book. And those I am expecting are gonna be so, like, wow, I can't wait to read those. But unfortunately, 2024 is coming to a close, so they didn't make my list because I haven't read them yet. So the two, though, out of the many was 46's I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer by Michelle McNamara. And so this is the haunting true story of the elusive serial rapist turned murderer and terrorized California during the 70s and 80s, and of the gifted journalist who died tragically while investigating the case, which was solved in April 2018. For more than 10 years, a mysterious and violent predator committed 50 sexual assaults in Northern California before moving south, where he perpetrated 10 sadistic murders. Then he disappeared, eluding capture by multiple police forces and some of the best detectives in the area. 3 decades later, Michelle is a true crime journalist who created the popular website truecrimediary.com and was determined to find the violent psychopath she called the Golden State Killer. She pored over police reports, interviewed victims, and embedded herself in the online communities that were as obsessed with the case as she was. This masterpiece, Mara was writing at the time of her sudden death, offers an atmospheric snapshot of a moment in American history and a chilling account of a criminal mastermind and the wreckage he left behind. It is also a portrait of a woman's obsession and her unflagging pursuit of the truth. Utterly original and compelling, it has been hailed as a modern true crime classic, one which fulfilled Michelle's dream, helping unmask the Golden State Killer. So this book, I mean, it's just amazing to read. I believe it was her husband who ended up finishing the book for her, if I'm correct, or he definitely, I think, wrote like an afterword or something in there. I can't really remember exactly because it was earlier in the year when I listened to this. I've watched anything on the Golden State Killer, or, you know, even listened to anything. I've listened to a lot of podcasts on this case. I think I watched one like documentary on it. And it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing how he gets captured. If you follow that, I kind of think like tongue-in-cheek, like God has quite the sense of humor. But it is just, it was an amazing case. And I do think that, like, knowing how things kind of came together once they figured out who he was, I do think as you read this book, knowing that, how he who he was and what he did for a living, and like all of that, when you're reading her account and you're realizing like, oh, she never knew who it was and it wasn't revealed until after her book was published, you can see some of the little things that she was writing and was documenting, and some of the things she was focused on, and it was like, yeah, no, I think she had her finger on it. I don't think she knew who he was, obviously, but you could see enough of the breadcrumbs that she was focused on and bringing together in the book, like, oh my gosh, she was so close. She was so close. And so I do think that while her book did not like give us who he was, she definitely has documented enough in the book where you could say she knew what she was talking about. She was piecing things together. The last one is Mindhunter, Inside the FBI's Elite Serial Killer Unit by John E. Douglas. So John E. Douglas has a ton of books out there. I actually read some of his other books before I read Mindhunter, and I think, and I haven't read all of them, but I think Mindhunter is definitely the one to start with because he goes in a lot of his background, his personal background, which I think some people didn't like about that. But from my point of view, having read quite a few of his other books and not getting like his background, and then to go and read Mindhunter and he's like filling in all about his background, I actually really enjoyed it. So again, if you're just starting out with Mindhunter and you're learning about his background, you're like, why is he focusing so much on this? Like, to me, it was really nice to, I really enjoyed getting like why he became and how he became who he was. So the chilling, obviously, it was like, oh my goodness, you know, just figuring out. It was amazing, and I enjoyed a lot of John Douglas's books that I read this year, but this is definitely the one that stayed with me the most. Discover the classic behind the scenes chronicle of Douglas's 25-year career in the FBI Investigative Support Unit, where he used psychological profiling to delve into the minds of the country's most notorious serial killers and criminals. In chilling detail, the legendary Mindhunter takes us behind the scenes of some of his most gruesome, fascinating, and challenging cases and into the darkest recesses of our worst nightmares. During his 25-year career with the Investigative Support Unit, Special Agent John Douglas became a legendary figure in law enforcement, pursuing some of the most notorious and sadistic serial killers of our time. The man who hunted prostitutes for sport in the woods of Alaska, the Atlanta child murderer, and Seattle's Green River Killer, the case that nearly cost Douglas his life. As the model for Jack Crawford in Silence of the Lambs, Douglas has confronted, interviewed, and studied scores of serial killers and assassins, including Manson, Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, and Ed Gein, who dressed himself in his victims' peeled skin. Using his uncanny ability to become both predator and prey, Douglas examines each crime scene, reliving both the killers and the victims' actions in his mind, creating their profiles and describing their habits and predicting their next move. So again, he is really going into understanding the behavior of why the killer did what they did, and really taking that and understanding the behaviors at a crime scene to figure out who the killer could be. So, you know, he is known for going and interviewing some of these serial killers or just these convicted murderers and trying to get into their mind to understand essentially what made them become the person who would do that to other people, and it eventually morphing into where he could go to crime scenes and pick up on the things that were done at the crime scene to then create a profile on behavior. And it is so amazing to listen to him and his mind work when he's trying to go and profile who the suspect could be. But again, just getting into his understanding his mind as he's interviewing people like Manson or whoever it is. And you know, some of the people I won't say who, but some of the people like he was interviewing, like they genuinely actually wanted to like talk with him because they wanted him to help them figure out why they did what they did. I mean, it is very eye-opening. It is definitely like, you know, make sure your doors are locked and make sure your windows are closed. Keep those blinds closed at night. Like, you definitely are, you know, puts you a little iffy. I definitely was listening to this while I was wrapping Christmas presents. So, like, you know, piece it all together. Okay, so that is the 47 books out of the 144 books that I read / listened to this year in 2024, and those 47 were my favorite. Those are books that I would not only give 5 stars, but I would listen to again, maybe very quickly I would listen to again, or maybe in a couple years I would listen to, but regardless, I would definitely listen to them again. They are rereads for me or re-listens, and these books are also ones that left an impact and that I couldn't stop thinking of. So comment down below, let me know what your 2024 favorite reads were. I would be so excited. I can't, like, these are my favorite videos. I can't get enough. Whatever genre they are, comment down below and let me know what your favorite 2024 reads were so that I can get great recommendations going in 2025. My TBR list is pretty long, but honestly, like, I only have a few that I'm super excited to start. I would love if you would like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye guys.